And let me say at the outset that we're not in an acoustically perfect room. So if you're having a hard time hearing me, wave an arm or throw a shoe or something, James, I know you can hear me. Thank you for coming out. I know that Saturdays in late August are the days for getting the lawn mowed and getting the yard sale done and getting the grandkids or the kids off to football practice or band practice. So I know you're sacrificing some time to be here, and I hope that you make it your time. I will tell you at the outset that we are asked many, many times why we are doing this. And why in the world would you want to get into politics, Bernie Skoch, when you're doing okay and life is good? But I will tell you, I don't want to get into politics. I have no desire to be a politician. My desire is to try and change the way we've been doing business in Washington, D.C. for far too many years. And I will tell you that I'm running as a Republican, and I'm challenging a 4-term, almost 5-term incumbent. And people are saying, what do you think, Scott? This guy is doing okay. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that. But my view is, aside from the fact that I'm running as a Republican, I wouldn't give you a nickel for the difference between how the Republicans are acting and how the Democrats are acting on a lot of critical topics. Thank you for the amen. I am worried about the future of our nation. And I will tell you, I think there are 3 overarching causes of what we're dealing with right now. And the first is, it is my fundamental view that we have walked away from the Constitution of the United States. We have walked away from this notion, as well spelled out in the Constitution, and I hope you've read it as often as I have, that the federal government was supposed to be something very small. The federal government was something that had very limited powers. But what we have done in our modern day wisdom is decided that we're smarter than the founding fathers. And we've decided that we should create things in the federal government that, in my view, the founding fathers never intended. I really need to understand some of the programs that we have today, because I do not. I do not understand places. Do I need this? Yes. Well, is it working? Yes. Okay. Does that help? I feel like I'm holding a Tootsie Roll. I really need to understand why it is that we have several federal departments and many, many federal programs. So one of the first premises of this campaign is we've got to do something about returning to the Constitution. The second overarching issue that I think we are facing is this thing called the budget. Folks, we have accrued as much debt as we can on our Visa card, our MasterCard, our Discover, our Diners Club, and any other kind of credit card we can scrounge up. In fact, the credit brokers are calling us up saying, you're overdue. We have accumulated over $11 trillion in debt. And for every one of my children, every one of my grandchildren, every one of us, that equates to $40,000 in debt. And that has got to stop because it is not sustainable. We'll talk about that a little bit here in a bit. But the third and greatest reason that I'm doing this is I am concerned that we have turned over our government to a group of professional politicians. And I am being criticized very widely for what I'm doing because I'm daring to challenge the status quo. And I'm daring to run for an office. And I'm daring to stand up and say, you know, I know the Republican that is in power is a nice guy. The guy that's in office is a nice guy. But I think there's some things that we can do better. And the way the process works, and you're probably aware of this, is you're expected to kind of run for an office like city council or a school board. And then the party will say, and now it's time for you to run for a state office. And now it's time to run for a constitutional office in the state. And now it's time for you maybe to run for the House of Representatives. Well, folks, I don't think we need professional politicians. My vision is that if this campaign is successful, and I've got a lot of reasons to think that it will be, if this campaign is successful, I'll go serve a couple of terms. And then it's your turn. And then it's your turn. And then it's your turn. When the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution and included in it this thing we call representative government, they wanted people who were representatives. They wanted people who went up there for a short time, understanding what the problems were of everyone that lives here, and go serve a bit and then come home. But when we have politicians that go in office and stay in office at the local level, the state level, the federal level, for 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years, I don't think we're doing what the Founding Fathers intended. Can I have an amen to that? So if we look at these three fundamental areas, returning to the Constitution, balancing the budget, and walking away from professional politicians, you pretty well have a view of what we are standing for. Now, we have billed what we're doing today, and it has been presented in the media as a town hall meeting, and candidly, that's become a very popular term, and that's okay. But I'd like it very much to be a dialogue. Rather than me standing up here and talking, I welcome your questions on any issue you care to bring up. But what I have prepared is a couple presentations on what the campaign is about, and then we'll talk about a couple of very important issues that we're facing today. And one is immigration, and more specifically illegal immigration, and the other is health care. And I have some interesting theories on health care and why we're having this debate right now. But Michael, if you go to the first chart, please. We need to return to the Constitution. And my platform calls for a department by department and a program by program review. Folks, I do not understand why we have a federal Department of Education. Now, the Skoches are all about education. We have 6 children, and 4 of them about to have their names on the sidewalk at the U of A, and we are all about education in the Skoch home. We think it's important, but I don't understand why that's a federal role. Now, if you have read the Constitution, and I'm sure you have, you will see in there this thing called the 10th Amendment. And what the 10th Amendment says, unless it is called out in the Constitution as belonging to the federal government, it belongs to the states or directly to the people. And there's no limitation. There's no discussion, there's no, well, maybe sorta, and maybe later you'll form a Department of Labor, and maybe later you'll form a Department of Education, and maybe later you'll start providing for individuals' welfare. The Constitution is very clear. So the first plank on my platform is we have got to do a department by department and program by program review to require that anything the federal government belongs in the federal government. Next chart, Mike. Now, balancing the budget is a huge issue. We cannot continue to spend what we are spending. Now, you may have heard some news in the last couple of days, or maybe not, that the new projections for the 10-year deficit are wildly higher than we heard just months ago from the administration. We are talking $10 trillion in deficits. Folks, that is an incomprehensible amount of money. Now, with respect to my opponent in the primary, John Bozeman, who is a fine man, he is a good guy, I really believe that. But I will tell you, we had this discussion. And he said, what do we so disagree on? And I said, well, Congressman, I got to tell you, I disagree with you on financial matters, on fiscal matters. And he said, well, what about? And I said, well, how about this notion of voting to increase the national debt? Because our representative from this district voted yes on increasing the federal debt to over $11 trillion. And he said, well, what did you want me to do? Shut down the government? And my answer was, you know and I know that we would not shut down the critical functions, the essential functions. The FAA would continue to control airplanes, federal law enforcement officers would still perform their jobs, those things would be done. The troops on the front lines would have their bullets and their bacon and everything they needed. But folks, listen to the logic that represents. Because as long as we keep extending the national debt higher and higher and higher, what we are doing is saying government gets bigger, so the debt gets bigger. So government gets bigger, so the debt gets bigger. And folks, let me offer to you, we do need to shut down parts of the government.